back to this. All right, we're moving on to the next chapter. So, I mean, I could spend weeks and weeks and weeks doing the taking the roof off thing. It's just so much fun to point out logical inconsistencies and beliefs and worldviews and all that stuff. But we should move on to the next one. This next one is called Steamroller. This is a defensive tactic. It'll become very obvious, and you probably have had an experience with someone who's a steamroller. But first, we always go over this every time, because these questions should be in your mind. These questions can be applied to literally anything. I was just saying to Stephanie, it's like, you can apply this to Scripture. Like, you're reading through Scripture, and you see something that you're like, well, what did it mean by that? It's a great question. What does it mean by that? You know, why did the author of Scripture use that word rather than some other word? Or what is that underlying Greek or Hebrew word? You know, go to a concordance or some kind of lexicon to look up what it meant at the time that it was written. What does that mean? Gather more information. So, if you're interacting with somebody and they make a claim, and you go, well, what do you mean by something about that claim? Gather information. And remember, the beauty of asking these questions is you get to listen. You don't have to come up with answers yourself, right? You don't have to be the one going, blah, 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 you know, and explaining lots of things. Now, if someone realizes what you're doing, they'll start firing questions back at you. And someone who's insincere will do it repeatedly, and they're, oh, well, that's the steamroller. So we should focus on this. Yeah, so what do you mean by that? And then again, once you have an understanding of where they're coming from or a basis of the claim, then ask for reasons why they believe that claim to be true. So how did you reach that conclusion? These are the reasons for why they believe what they believe. And as you're listening to those reasons, you can see whether maybe one reason is in conflict with another reason. Maybe those are just bad reasons to believe something. Maybe there's no reasons. And then you can ask them why they don't, like, is it your habit to just believe things without really good reasons? Which is a little bit confrontational, but that's okay. And they might be like, well, what about you? It's like, well, I have really great reasons for why I believe Christ rose from the dead. Minimum facts. I forgot what it's called. The minimal facts explanation for the resurrection. And then once you get into that level of conversation, you can ask people if they've considered alternate views, and you can offer those. But today, or actually no, we're going to review a little bit. The last couple of weeks we talked about the taking the roof off. And taking the roof off, first step is to reduce the view to a basic principle, premise, or assertion, and then give the idea a test drive. So if this idea were true, what conclusions would it lead to? What are the consequences? And do they lead to something absurd? Welcome in. If it leads to absurd consequences, then you can go, well, maybe the premise, there's something wrong with the premise if it naturally leads to an absurd consequence or an absurd result. Or it proves too much. There's unintended consequences that seem counterintuitive to the principle in and of itself. So after you take it for a test drive, you exploit the tension and then cause a little bit of pain, show the illogic of the view, and invite the person to observe, hey, does this seem right? Does that seem like something you agree to? This is something so the example that we kind of kept going back to was the relative morality. Like, if you really, really believe that morality is relative and there's no objective standard above our individual subjective human minds, then that leads to some absurd conclusions when it comes to how we talk about morality. Because we all talk about and we make moral judgments as if there is an objective standard that we're all appealing to. Like, we like to call certain aspects of other people's, either individuals or cultures, what they do, wrong. and that they shouldn't do those things, and that they have a moral obligation to do other things rather than what they're doing. One of the examples I gave a while back was when a missionary over in Africa got the wife beating stick from somebody that he evangelized over in Africa. Because in their culture, it was okay to beat their wives into submission. They had a special stick that they would do it with. When you got married, the husband received this wife beating stick. And that was his authority within the family, within his household. And so if anybody went against his authority, he would beat them with the stick. That was just culturally normal. It wasn't wrong. If all we have is a relative morality, then within that culture, that's the right and good and proper thing to do. And since we're not within that culture, we can't criticize that. When we say that it's wrong, we're being mean and judgmental because we're not part of that culture. We're making moral judgments on something that we're not a part of, and that's wrong. But the wife beating is not wrong. But it's wrong to make judgments on other cultures that you're not a part of. That's wrong. So it's like, okay, if that's a conclusion that you want to embrace, that's a natural, logical conclusion to a relative morality. Now, I would hope that you would look at that and go, that's ridiculous. And I would say, yeah, that is ridiculous. Because when there's an objective standard that is above everybody, that is prior to our own subjective experience in our own minds, then that's the place of judgment. And everything needs to relate to that. And since that's above every other subjective morality, we can appeal to that, and everything is underneath that. And so the moral law that God has made within the world and that we all appeal to is actually there. And so when I say that beating your wife with a stick is wrong, I'm appealing to God's standard, not my own. But if God's not there, then go beat your wife. In fact, maybe you should enjoy it, because that's the right thing to do. I was like, what? So invite the person to think about the implications of their view, if it were really true. So that was the last couple of weeks. Steamroller. So this is a defensive tactic. It's when people try to overwhelm you with strong personalities, fast and furious questions, strong opinions. They keep you on the defense with a lot of attitude and noise. They are generally insincere and not interested in receiving answers to their questions, and they want to win through intimidation. So if you ever get into a conversation with someone that just you can't get a word in edgewise, like you try to say something and then they just like cut you off immediately and insert another question or another something else. They're the steamroller. They're just rolling over you, right? Just by constantly bringing up something else, bringing up something else, bringing up something else. So how do they operate? They interrupt constantly. This is what a steamroller. So I'm sure you've talked to somebody that does this, right? Someone who just interrupts constantly. They cut you off before you can respond. As soon as you begin to answer one objection or challenge, they find something to object within your explanation and then interrupt again and pile on more challenges. And it's just nonstop, just keeps going and going and going. Not only that, they change the subject repeatedly. So it's like, well, now we've moved the goalposts again. I'm trying to have a conversation, but then interruption, change the subject. Basically, they're not listening to what you have to say. And then they interrupt you when you do try to say something. Anybody had that experience? Right? Yeah. Like, never had that experience. Yeah, I mean, sounds familiar, right? So I tried to, oh wait, it'll be the next slide. Oh, this is the same one. So I tried to find an example. This is not a great example, but it's Charlie Kirk getting in a debate with a smug student. Of course, the title of these videos are always, really great. And this one is slightly edited, so it makes it look, it might not have been as bad as the video shows. There's one clear edit at the beginning that makes, they cut something out for sure. But this guy does just like one after the other, after the other, after the other, and he's trying to do it to prove a point, like a rhetorical point, but doesn't seem like he really wants to hear what Charlie Kirk has to say. And again, this is not the best example, but it kind of illustrates the point.
Can you do a differential equation?
Can I do
Can you explain to me the anatomy of a human?
Someone
Do
off
you
the top
know
of my
what
head?
psychology is?
Yes, I do know what psychology.
Okay,
I've read
can you
Freud and I've read
explain
Jung.
it to me?
Do you want me to explain psychology?
Well, you can't explain it to the depths of a bachelor's degree or a PhD.
Well, hold
or
on a second.
master's.
Time out. I've sat here with no notes, no phone, and debated people with
Yeah, because you
PhDs,
study
masters.
this because it's your job.
Hold on. I didn't go to college, man. That's the point. Is you can do whatever you want without a college degree. You can listen to podcasts, read books. You
think
don't
about
need
if
to
Gauss
go.
wasn't able to go to the University of Göttingen. You know Gauss, right?
Vaguely, sure. Okay.
Vaguely.
Yes, vaguely. Yeah.
Oh,
Do you know who
okay.
Milton Friedman is? Do you know who Herbert Marcuse is? You know who Thomas Sowell is?
Do you use a phone?
Do you know who Gouverneur Morris is?
Well, that's 'cause of Gauss.
No, you don't. So I could do gotcha too.
Right, exactly. So notice the kid was just like, do you know this? Can you explain this? Can you explain this? Can you explain that? And then he's like, well, give me a second. And he even said like, whoa, hold on. Like, just stop for a second. Let me say something. And he was already just like, boom, boom, ready to give more and more and more. Not really listening. And then he boils it down to, yeah, I can do the gotcha moment too. Like, you throw out a name of someone that I should be aware of if I was an educated person. And then I go, vaguely. And he goes, oh, well, you must be an idiot because you don't know who this person is. And you go, I can do it too. What about this? And he starts naming these libertarians and stuff, or conservatives. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? Oh, come on. You want to go to the next one. Or not. No. There we go.
Can you do it?
All right, so how do you deal with a steamroller? There's 3 steps. This is it. All right, these will expand. There's more to it than that, but that's pretty much it. It boils down to this. And this is right out of the tactics book, and he gives a bunch of examples, but what we'll do is we'll expand these a little bit and have specific, like I just copied the wording of things that he uses in conversation to either stop or to shame or like, hey, we're going to leave. So what does he mean by stop him? So to stop him, it means stop the interruption graciously and firmly and then negotiate an agreement. So that's what he means. First step is to stop him. And then negotiate an agreement. And his first example is like, just hold up your hand, right? So you're using body language to signal like, whoa, whoa, stop. And in the video example, that's what Kirk does, right? He's like, whoa, whoa, that's like, hold on, give me a second. So it's like, I'm not finished yet. Let me continue. Like, is it okay? Wait, the implicit question is it okay if I continue? You just interrupted me, right? So trying to stop the interruption. If they're like a really strong personality, that's not going to stop them, right? So you'll have to be a bit more firm, still gracious. That's the thing, still gracious. But you're asking for time and patience, so that way you can give an answer. Try not to talk over, but wait for a clear opening where you can stop them and then negotiate the conversation further. So, an example, it's like, hold on a minute, I need a little more time. You asked a good question, and you deserve an answer. Are you interested in what I have to say? And what you'll notice with Kokel, every one of Kokel's little quotes that I have here, it always ends with a question. Because it's still a conversation, or at least you're still trying to have a conversation with someone. So when you ask a question, then that allows them to respond. However, if you go, are you interested in what I have to say? It's like, yeah, I am interested in what you have to say about this, you know, and then like continue going on. It's, okay, all right. And another thing to think about, especially in Kirk's example, like he sets up a table, he has a microphone. He has a microphone for someone in the audience to talk with him. He's a captive audience. Right? So there were 3 steps, right? Stop him, shame him, leave. If you set up a space like that, you can't leave.
Right.
So what I'm thinking of is the fair booth. You might just have to sit there and just like take it.
Sit there and shame them.
And just shame them. It's like, would you consider yourself a good listener? Yes. Okay. I will sit here and listen to you rant.
I have one tactic that works for me with the steamroller in my life. Actually, there's only 2. One is up there on that board. The first one is if I can't get them to stop steamrolling over me, I shove food in their mouth.
Food.
And that's not up there.
And that's
The
not.
other one is I just have to walk away because they're not interested in listening to anything I have to say.
Right. Yeah. When they're not. Yeah. When they're not. When it's clear that they're not interested in listening, and we'll get to that. There's 2 proverbs that we're going to talk about, and then there's something that Jesus said. Shoving food in someone's mouth.
We do that at the fair booth, right?
Yeah. All right.
Have some coffee.
Hey, here's
Here, have a holy hot dog.
here's some candy. Yeah. We need. Yeah, you need something that's like where they have to do that kind of thing. Yeah.
Old caramel.
Yeah, taffy or caramels or whatever. Yeah, just like really get stuck to the roof of your mouth.
I'll sprinkle it with a little holy water.
And there you go. Just like, wow, right there. So notice what he says. He gets them to stop, need a little more time, and then finishes with a question. Are you interested in what I have to say? And by finishing with a question again, you're getting buy-in from the other person. Hopefully, if you can stop them and get them to go, oh, okay, because not every time are they insincere. I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with someone who's really excited or excitable, and they're just like, yeah, oh, this and that. It's like, hold on, let me explain. All right, maybe if you're at work and you're training someone new, and they're super excited to learn all of the things, and then they just start asking questions that are like way past where they are. It's like, you need to learn the basics first before you can actually get into like all this other stuff. You're gonna have to be patient. It's like, oh, but I just want to do this thing. It's like, that's great. I love that attitude, but we're gonna have to pump the brakes a little bit. Kind of similar to that. Again, another example. I know you have a lot of questions, but I need a moment to explain myself. Is that okay with you? And a lot of these just finish with, is that okay with you? And then hopefully that'll get them to go, oh, yes, let me self-regulate. All right, last example. That's a good question, and it deserves a decent answer. I need a moment to give you one. Is that okay? Just give me some time. Allow me to make my point, and then we can talk about that point if you want. After you've made your point, ask them to acknowledge your response. Is that a fair answer to your question? And then you can talk about that. If that doesn't work, if you can't stop them, then shame them, right? Because if you ask that first question, you've made an agreement. It's like, hey, we've both agreed that I can get to a certain point, and you didn't let me get to that certain point. So, are you the kind of person that, like, would you consider yourself a good listener? It's like, well, yeah. It's like, okay, well, you're not listening to me because you just interrupted me again. If they break the agreement, you need to be more aggressive. basically more direct. Ignore, so a lot of times they're just bringing up new challenges, more questions, more questions, more questions. Don't just ignore all of those because you're trying to answer the first one, but then they bring up 3 more. So you go, all right, I'm not even going to touch any of the challenges. I'm just going to directly address the bad manners that are happening right now. And it needs to be direct, but also calm. This can be really difficult if somebody gets under your skin. Very difficult. But what you have is the truth. And that should give you a lot of confidence. If someone doesn't want to listen to you, then they don't want to listen to you. That's not on you. That's on them. What you have is the truth. You're just trying to share it. But if they just keep pestering you and interrupting you, then it's like, well, I don't know what you want me to do with that. What are we doing here? So to shame them, you're pointing out, you're basically narrating what's happening. It's like, hey, every time I try to answer your question, you interrupt me. What's up with that? What's going on here? So here's an example. Could I ask you a favor? Again, he starts with a question, right? I'd love to respond to your concern, but I cannot because you keep interrupting. So now you're directly pointing at what's going on. Could I have a few moments to develop my point without being cut off? Then you can tell me what you think. Is that okay with you? So again, there's 3 questions in there for the person. And it's like, I do want to continue having this conversation. So you express a desire, right? But you point out what's going on. You just narrate what's happening here. Hey, you keep interrupting. That's what you're doing. I can see it. If you can't see it, I'm pointing it out to you now. This is not how a conversation goes. Could I have a few moments? So now I'm asking for time and patience. Then you can tell me what you think. And if this is the second, so again, we've tried step 1, which is to negotiate an agreement. This is step 2, where it's like, hey, you violated that agreement. We're going to try this again, but I'm going to be more direct. Maybe you didn't get it the first time. So that's gracious, is what that is. And as Christians, that ought to be how we behave, is graciously with people. So this is like, all right, we are shaming them. We're pointing out something that they're doing wrong. And they probably won't like that. That's okay. It's still wrong. Like, you shouldn't interrupt people if you're trying to have a conversation with them. And then ask, is that okay with you? Another example. This one's really long. Can I ask you a quick question? I need to know whether you want an answer to your challenge or if you just want to talk. When you keep interrupting me, I get the impression you don't really want an answer. If all you want is an audience, just let me know. I will listen. But if you want an answer, you'll have to give me time to respond. Which do you want? I need to know before we can continue. And then silence. That's a lot, right? But again, it accomplishes what you're trying to do. Basically, you're trying to halt the conversation where you're at and ask them, or point out what they're doing and ask them if they see what they're doing and what do they really want here. If they just want to rant, it's like, cool, I'll let you rant. That happened to me at work. It was during all the COVID stuff, right? There's all these mask mandates, especially in Anchorage. There were way more emergency ordinances in Anchorage than out here. And I mean, we had to parse the law and our policies. It was madness. So during our homeschool class in like the middle of the day, I was supposed to be training a new staff member. So we were in the conference room. I was going through information. One of the front desk staff comes in and goes, "Hey, there's a woman at the front desk. She wants to talk to a manager." I'm like, that's me. All right. And I get up and I go to the front desk, and it was 45 minutes. 45 minutes of, and much of what she said, I completely agreed with. I'm like, that's not the ordinance. And if we're going to be open, we got to follow these rules. I don't make those rules. I'm just having to apply them. And there were a few times where what she said was contradictory, and I pointed those out because I was like, "Ooh, you shouldn't say that if you're trying to convince somebody." Because I agreed with a lot of what she had to say. Like at one point, she said that that masks were useless, and I was like, you know. And then like later in the conversation, she said that they were extremely dangerous to the health of kids that were wearing them, and she said they were useless because they didn't actually, block anything or whatever. So like everything's getting through was the claim, and I was like, okay, that's whatever. But then later she said they're extremely dangerous because it holds everything in. I was like, well, it can't be both. Right? You got to pick one of those. And then I was like, hey, you should think about that. And she gave me this website that had endless pages of information and all that. And I was like, this is okay. But it took 45 minutes. She just needed someone to hear all of the things. And I was there to do it. And it was an excellent customer service experience. She thanked me for listening. She was still very frustrated that her kids had to wear a mask while in the gym. And I was like, well, then pull them out. Pull them out of the program. Like, well, they love climbing. I'm like, okay. I hate this too. I wish I could tell you something different. But this is the way it is right now. Sometimes that's what people want, and if you know that, then you can just reformat your brain on what's going on here. Cool, you just want to rant? All right, I can listen to that. I've got time, kind of. I should be training someone. It was 45 minutes of training that was not happening. But it also they saw that I'll be the shield for the staff, right? I'll be the person that stands there.
You might have missed 45 minutes of one training, but you got 45 minutes in another type.
Yep.
You can look at it like that.
Patience. The only way you gain patience is to go through difficult times. All right, step 3. When all else fails, leave. Right? If they won't let you finish, just listen politely and then leave. This is the tough one. Let them have the satisfaction of having the last word, and then politely end the conversation.
What if 45 minutes later they're still not done having the last word, and then I just politely excuse myself
Yeah,
and leave?
that would be when she started repeating herself. That's when I was like, hey, I need to get back. And she was like, okay, I get it. I was like, it's been a long time. And then I got back, the person in the conference room waiting for me to come back to train, they were just, doing this. I'm like, okay. But yeah, it can be difficult to let someone have the last word after they've gotten underneath your skin. But one, they're just going to keep talking anyways. And if you've already gotten to this point where it's like, all right, the conversation is over, they're not listening anyways. Even if you had to have the last word and you made sure you had the last word, they're not going to hear it anyways. It doesn't really matter. At that point, it's a point of pride for you. And you should watch out for that. Ignore any new challenges. And, let them have the satisfaction of having the last word and the conversation. Wisdom demands that you not waste your time with a person like that. So here's a couple of scriptures to think about. This is one of my favorite little pieces of scripture because back to back are the exact opposite piece of wisdom in the verses right next to each other. So Proverbs 26:4 and 5. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. So don't answer them. Don't confront them. Don't talk to them about it, lest you be like them. The very next verse says the exact opposite thing. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. So which should you do in any given situation? Depends. Exactly. This is where the phrase Proverbs are not promises. This is a great example of that. It's not a law. It's not a law. It's wisdom. Sometimes verse 4 needs to be applied, and sometimes verse 5 needs to be applied. Well, how will I know? Well, it takes wisdom to know when. And I think the first one, verse 4 is the example of the steamroller. If someone's just interrupting and they're being a steamroller and they just are not listening, don't even deal with those people. There are other people, if you're trying to share your faith with people, there are other people that will listen. That's not on you. If you're trying to be a faithful ambassador for Christ, someone else's response to that message is not your responsibility. That's not on you. What is on you is to share your faith in the best way that you can. And hopefully going through these tactics and talking about these things helps you in that endeavor. But their response is on them before God. That's not your responsibility. Now, if you respond in kind and you become your own steamroller because you're frustrated with them, that's not a that's not a good way to do it. Because the fool in the verse 5, the fool does need to know that they're being a fool. How else are they supposed to change if no one tells them that what they're doing is foolish? Like at some point, somebody's got to tell them. And if everybody's afraid to tell them, they're just going to continue being foolish. So someone has to answer them according to their folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. But it really depends on, I guess, partially your relationship to them. If a stranger walks up and they don't care about you, maybe they do. Maybe they have a heart that's soft towards others, but maybe they don't. They don't care. They're probably, they might not listen to anything you have to say. But somebody who has a little bit of humility, a little bit of a soft heart, when you point out their foolishness, they'll be like, oh, that is how I'm being wise in my own eyes, and that's not good.
But isn't that, verse 5, isn't that what you're doing at the beginning? When you're using their every example being consistent with, and then you can see how foolish they are.
Right. So, and the way that you do it is by kind of narrating the situation. And it's like you're just presenting it before them. And if they still can't see it, then it's like, okay, I guess there's no point in trying to have a conversation because it's not a conversation anymore. But yeah, that's what you're trying to do, right? Jesus, give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. So, we have to know who the dogs are. That requires judgment. And what's really interesting is this comes right after probably the most well-known teaching of Jesus that is taken out of context. Right. Judge not. Usually it just stops there. Usually they're going to quote the Bible. It's judge not. And then they stop. It's like, oh, there's more. Like, there's way more. It's like, judge not lest thou be judged. With the judgment that you mete out, that's what you'll be judged by. And then he does the beam in your eye and the mote in your, take the beam out of your eye so you can remove the mote out of your brother's eye. And then comes this. So within context, it's, if you're a hypocrite in your judgment, then expect that kind of judgment back. So don't be a hypocrite. Remove the beam out of your own eye so that you can remove the mote out of your brother's eye. It doesn't say ignore the beam and ignore the mote. He doesn't say that. He says, no, just don't be a hypocrite. Don't pretend like you're better than someone else. No, you've got this beam sticking out of your face. Like, what are you doing? Make sure the time. Okay. So once you take the beam out of your own eye and you recognize your own tendency and flaws, now you're more prepared to take the mote out of your brother's eye. Then he says this. You have to make judgments in order to apply this scripture. Give not that which is holy unto the dogs. Like, if someone is being a steamroller, they are demonstrating that they don't want what you're giving them. So don't give it to them. Don't give that which is holy to the dogs. Neither cast your pearls before swine. Why? They don't care. Pearls are not important to pigs. And then they're going to trample it into the mud, you're going to lose your pearls, and then they're going to come and attack you because it wasn't food. Like, you didn't tickle their ego, so they're going to come and get you. So watch out for that. What your attitude should be, and this is the difficult part. Patient, calm, gracious, gentle, and respectful. Even though they're treating you disrespectful, you don't get to treat them disrespectful. Right? You don't answer evil with evil. You answer evil with good. Stay focused, and that means, like, when they throw up 15 objections, you're still trying to focus on that first one, but they've already, like, gone way down the road to this other one. And then don't become a steamroller yourself. Yep. Let them have the last word. It's not worth fighting over. Just don't fight with them. That's the kind of... So this is a defensive thing. And it's just knowing when to exit a conversation. If someone perpetually interrupts you, it's time to go. To apply that to the fair booth, you might have to suffer a lot of just da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That might be exactly what they need. Maybe nobody ever listens to them, ever. And they have all these thoughts and they just wish that they could just vomit on somebody. It's like, well, Lord, I don't know what you're trying to teach me in this moment, but I'm open to receive. It's like, if I'm supposed to learn patience, this is a great opportunity to learn some patience. Not every time is it like just really negative stuff. I don't know if you guys have had this experience at the fair booth, but some people just start sharing very personal things about their life and just go like on for a long time. And I'm like, I don't know you. Like, wow, you're totally comfortable sharing that with a total stranger at the fair. But it says, Valley Baptist in the background. So they're like, oh, someone that can listen or something like that. It's like, yeah. I was like, let me give you Pastor's number. It's like, no, hey, I probably shouldn't have said that. That's me. That's me.
When I run across that, usually I just let them unburden themselves, and here's why. Because it might give them the relief that they need to deal with other people throughout their day in a better, more positive manner. And I think that kind of thing, it just keeps on growing.
Yeah. No, and that can be, I guess, guard your own heart though. Especially if you're one that kind of takes on the burdens of others. If you're very empathetic, then that can be dangerous. Because someone can just like dump all of this, and then you like take it on and you think about it and you dwell on it. It's like, I mean, you still want to be gracious, but if that's your tendency, that can also be a little dangerous too. So guard your heart as well.
That comes through time.
Yep, definitely. It is 10:40, so let's go back to the top. Actually, let me turn this off.